Production. My name's Jay Azzo, and oh man, another great show for you. I'm just telling you, it's awesome. The author's named Josh Block. The book is entitled "People Matter at Work: Fostering a Culture Where Team Members Thrive and Everyone Wins." Let me just say something. Read a lot of books. I've read some 700 books since we've been doing the show. I don't know, something like that. And you come across books. I come across books. First of all, I turn down more than I ever accept, and I come across one every now and then that just speaks to the very heart of who I am and speaks to the things that I'm doing. This is one of those books, by the way. I'm a big Lencioni fan, right? If you ever heard of The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I'm a huge Lencioni fan. Matter of fact, I'm doing that right now with a team, walking them through the 5 dysfunctions right now. A 12-week kind of course that we're walking through. And clearly, Josh has been inspired by Lencioni's work. Okay, clearly he has been. But he takes this to another level, right? Listen, we're going to talk about some of the words that you've heard on the show before. You've heard about humility, right? And we've heard about that. He's going to take that a little bit different twist, right? We've heard about discipline. We've heard about leadership, whatever that means, culture, however we want to define that, because it's not as simple as defining it very simply, because it's. I think as Josh says, it can mean everything and it can mean nothing all at the same time. So, and that's so true, by the way, with all these terms, right? We can say humility can mean everything, can mean nothing. Discipline can mean everything, can mean nothing. It's just leadership can mean everything, can mean nothing. Mm-hmm. But the beautiful thing about the book is it's about something that we don't want to talk about in business very often. And that is, if we do the right thing by people, our business actually thrives. Mm. So if you remember last week, I did a book by Ken Blanchard and Mark Miller wrote a book called The Secret, right? And they talked about the V and serve of you got to value both results and relationships. Mm. And so often what we do in business is we value results, but we don't really value the relationships. We say we do. We like to say we do. But at the end of the day, we're valuing the results more than the people. This is the counterpiece to this. Why valuing your people become so much more important. And, it's just a truth that we can't ignore. It's a fact. I played college football, played a little after, right? And have played sports my whole life. The fact of the matter is, when everybody is on the same team, every championship I've ever won in my life has been because we all rowed in the same direction. We knew our roles, and we knew the significance that our roles played, but that's because we mattered. Mm. We mattered to the coaches. We mattered to each other. We mattered. We were seen, right? And that was valuable. We ultimately were successful, right? Which is what we wanted. Mm. And all of a sudden, our individual accomplishments just didn't matter as much because it was about the team and it wasn't about everything. We weren't renting the game. We owned the team for each other, which is something Josh is going to say. So without further ado, it's going to be my pleasure to introduce you to Josh Block. So have you ever wondered if it's actually possible to build a company where people come first and the business still wins?
I believe it.
Yeah, this is who Josh Block is. And he's proved it. For 15 years, Josh Block led Block Imaging, growing the team from 50 people to over 400 revenue from 30 million to 215 million, not by squeezing more out of people, by building a culture rooted in trust. He went on to found Cube Mobile Imaging, expanding access to medical imaging for patients across the country. And today he's executive advisor of Block Imaging and the author of his new book, People Matter at Work. Josh works with executives navigating growth, brand new managers who got the title without the training, and teams stuck in fear and disengagement. He helps them build trust, deepen ownership, and lead with generosity instead of pressure. If your leadership has ever felt heavier than it should, stick around because Josh Block is about to give you a new direction. Please welcome to the show, Josh Block. Josh, welcome to A New Direction.
Thanks so much for having me, Jay. It's great to be with you.
Let's just dig in. Just dig into the book. The preface kind of sticks out to me. It's so weird, right? That I would say the preface sticks out to me, but it really did. It was such a great setup for the rest of the book. And, I kind of preempted the show a little bit, but here's just some of the things you say. So for every book that zeroes in on humility as the common thread among successful leaders, there's a podcast that points to execution as the key for differentiators, or is the discipline the secret, right? Or the daily routines, right? Maybe it's learning. Maybe the answer you say is better found in the symphony of qualities that flow from who we are and what we believe. And then you go on to say this: I'm convinced that strong leadership is not primarily a function of positional authority or one of a specific trait, but is born out of deep trust and authentic character that can flow from true relationship. I think it's a great place to start because this is going to set the foundation for the rest of the show. So tell us, what do you mean that you're so convinced that strong leadership can only flow, is born out of deep trust and authentic character? Talk about that for real quick.
Yeah, just this genuine care for people and this trust, which again, as you mentioned, these words that mean everything and nothing. This idea for me, trust is, would Jay look out for me if I wasn't in the room? Like if Jay was talking about me, or if we were choosing a restaurant, or he was setting my pay, or he had feedback for me, like would he look out for me, or would he break trust? And so when we do actually look out for people, we strengthen trust, we deepen relationship, and all sorts of incredible things happen in an organization.
The introduction comes next. And I got intrigued by this because you tell us a little bit of your story, which, by the way, you weave your story in throughout this entire book, which is fantastic. It's a great story. But you basically, as a young adult, as a young child even, I would argue, that you just enjoyed work. You liked to work. It was just something. By the way, that's not everybody that likes that, right? And for a variety of reasons, right? Because and you make this point in the introduction that for most people, I would say for most people, and I think Gallup would argue this too because of the engagement studies, I think it's probably true, that you said, and you begin to realize that for most, work has become the four-letter expletive of our time, right? And we start to see phrases like, I got a case of the Mondays, I'm just working for the weekend. And the question that you ask that I think people want to answer is, has it always been this way? Is it always this bad? Is there a different way to look at it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Is this even consumerism, right? Is we are in a generation of consumerism, have it your way right away at Burger King now. And for a lot of generations, the goal was actually to produce so that you could survive. Right. And now we've kind of shifted from producing to, in many ways, consuming, that we've gone from earning to being entitled. And so, yeah, I think that work is such a pivotal part of our lives. I mean, it's not just how we provide, it becomes part of our identity. It becomes part of our community. And so work is such an opportunity, and yet it's become such a form of drudgery for so many.
You talk about in this introduction, too, that there's three pitfalls, and I don't want to ignore them because I think as a psychological professional, I think that these three are incredibly obvious pitfalls to me when I'm coaching businesses and coaching leaders and CEOs and executives in companies. The very first pitfall is comparison. And we have a saying in psychology that goes compare and despair, right? That whenever we compare, right? And before you started really getting into comparison, you talked about drafting, which I thought was really interesting. Talk to us. Let's talk through these three: comparison, context, and completion. Let's talk about the three pitfalls, each of those pitfalls really quickly, and why they're such pitfalls.
So when it comes to culture, or frankly, when you're reading a book by anyone, whether it be on nutrition or whether it be on marriage or parenting, the first thought can be to compare. And it's, well, he's in imaging, or there's all sorts of excuses for why this maybe won't work in our business because it's bigger, it's smaller, it's older, it's younger, or whatever, fill in the excuse blank. And so instead of comparing, you can draft, and in drafting is hiking or NASCAR or swimming, you can actually get behind someone. And so my encouragement as people read the book, as people are coached by someone, is to not focus on all the reasons why you can't do something because there's this subtle difference or maybe even significant difference, but really to say, like, what can I glean from this? What's one thing I can learn? What's one thing I can grab onto that would be a difference? And so that's really the comparison piece, which ties to context as well, which is, I understand that everybody's context is different. And for us, we have a lot of imaging engineers, and we're spread all throughout the United States. We went from being a heavily global organization to more of a service provider in the US. And so to not focus so much on context as a form of comparison. And then this last is completion, is you never arrive in culture building, is that you once you achieve a certain mile marker, it might be in terms of engagement, or it might be in terms of performance, that we keep going, because culture building is more a lifestyle than it is a destination.
I'm going to jump to chapter 2, which is entitled The Me Cycle and the Gift of Humble Pie. Let's talk about the me cycle, because I think the me cycle is more prevalent than we want to admit. We're not really very self-aware of our own me cycle, quite honestly. And we're certainly, I believe, as leaders, not very well aware of how the me cycle plays a role in our leadership in our companies. Let's talk about what that is. And then maybe along the way, let's talk about where all of a sudden humility starts to maybe alter that me cycle a little bit.
Yeah. So in the last question, you talked about my experience in work versus most of the world. So when I became a leader in 2011, 29 years old, unexpectedly over the course of a weekend, I began asking myself, like, what if we could create a place where people love to work? And not because it's easy, but because they're stretched and challenged and they go home better. And so in asking that question, you have to first start with the problem, is why is it the way it is? Why do we need to even create a vision to create a place where people love to work? And it's because that most organizations, the data tells us that work is an abysmal experience. And so I just started reverse engineering both successful leadership and poor leadership. And so in the form of the me cycle, it's everyone's focused on themselves, is that it's bosses look out for themselves, employees return the favor, and really work sucks for everyone. And in a lot of corporate environments where we're focused on short-term earnings, where short-term profitability, where we're focused on our own success, our own power, prestige, pay, all of these things come into play. And when we're focused on ourselves in any relationship, whether it be marriage or whether it be work, that's where things really start to fall apart, and it becomes more cannibalistic in nature.
So for you, you had a subtitle here called, two subtitles that caught my eye, Humble Pie and the Gift of Humility, right? So let's talk about a statement that you made under Humble Pie, that you say, I often reminded myself of the belief that through leading with values at the forefront and making one wise decision after another, we could build something special. I would love for you to talk about the idea of leading with values. Here's my experience. This is why I'm saying this is important, because it feels obvious to you and me, I think. But the more and more people that I coach, the more I find that very few have core values that they can explicitly tell me.
Yeah.
And I'm very clear on my core values. I know what they are. I try to guide my decision-making process. I'm not perfect at it. I'm just growing and getting better at it, okay? Talk to us about why, as part of humility, that leading with values and putting those at the forefront. Why that becomes such a critical part of the decision-making process.
Yeah, we all are leading with core values, whether we know it or not. And so for some organizations, they're just accidental. And we have, and again, I think so much of this ties to work, but it ties, I have a 17 and 19-year-old. So thinking about parenting or in any relationship is like, what are the values? And this starts with vision. It starts with this idea of like, who do I want to be? And even this richly imagined future idea, which I've been thinking a lot about, is like, what do I want the moments in the future to look like? What do I want my relationship with my daughter to be when I walk her down the aisle, or when I drop her off at college, or when she sees me at a soccer game, or whatever it is that we get, if we pre-decide, it actually makes it makes hard decisions much clearer. It doesn't make them any more difficult to walk out. But I think that when we come to a fork in the road and we're not sure, because we haven't pre-decided, like, will I be a person of integrity? Will I be a person who honors? Will I be a person who chooses to be clear and transparent? And so I just think pre-deciding actually is a form of making decisions for you, almost like packing your lunch the night before, your workout clothes the night before, or whatever it is you're kind of pre-deciding who you'll be and what decisions you'll make before you get to the fork in the road. Because once you've gotten to Olive Garden and they bring you the cheesecake tray, it's a little too late to decide what your values are, you know?
Yeah, you got to make that decision before you get to the restaurant, that's for sure.
Right. You're like, I wasn't planning to have cheesecake. I had fettuccine Alfredo, 3 salads, and 2 bowls of soup, so I should probably just finish it off with a caramel cheesecake.
Oh, we all do it. That's the problem is
Yeah.
we just all do it. It happens, right? It happens because we're not really thinking about that before we do. Although I am much better at it. Matter of fact, I even pass on the bread. You know, when the bread comes out, I even say no. I go, you know what? Take it back. Give it to another table. Don't care. Don't put it on the table. Just don't do it. So I am getting better at it. You said something that I've never read in all the books that I've read when it comes to talking about humility. Is you have a subtitle here, humility is courageous. I would love for you to expand on that concept, that humility is courageous.
Yeah, the word that has really come out in the last couple of years is this idea of imposter syndrome. And it's this idea that, like, well, I've become a leader, or I need to know it all. Before I speak up, I have to have it all figured out. And I'm beginning to realize, after all these years of leading and growing an organization and guiding people, is that the best leaders, it's not that they know the answers, it's that they ask the right questions of the right people at the right time. And so humility is less about what you know or what you don't know, and more about having a clear picture of strengths and weaknesses. And I have just found over and over, especially as a company grows, that your ability to focus on the right things and to ask the right questions is far more important than having the right answer. And for me, my journey of becoming president over the course of the weekend really ended up being a tremendous gift. Well, most of us would have said, oh, I would have liked a 5-year training plan. I would have loved a 90-day transition. I would have loved this kind of easing into the pool. All these years later, like, being thrown into the deep end with no life jacket ended up being a tremendous advantage and really led to this gift of humility that I talk about in the book.
I got kind of a comment question here from Steve Riddle, who's an author who's been on the show a couple times. And so if you don't mind, I'd like to take a time for my questions, right? He makes a comment. He says, to genuinely influence requires understanding not only what other people's values are, but also how they define them. Most people assume how I describe or define them must be how others do. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it draws me back to the difference between the golden rule and the platinum rule. Is this golden rule, treat others as I'd like to be treated. Platinum rule is treat others as they'd like to be treated. And so when it comes to values, I really like values that are through the lens of care for the other person. But we all define it. You see integrity or character or whatever it is. I really like the word, like, one of my core values is honor, because we live in a culture that's so fixated on tolerance. Like, oh, just tolerate, Jay, or maybe elevate from tolerance to respect, give dignity. And I'd say, like, actually, honor is going out of my way to. There was a person in front of me who the grocery store, the checkout counter wasn't working properly, and so she had to reload her stuff and go to the next line. Like, what does it look like? Not just to respect, but like, oh, sorry about your loss, and rather to really let someone go in front of you. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but this idea of really choosing my values through the lens of what it's like to be on the other side of me.
That's awesome. His name's Josh Block. The book is entitled People Matter at Work, Fostering a Culture Where Team Members Thrive and Everyone Wins, available at Amazon for sure. Bookstores everywhere. If it's not in your bookstore, tell them, bring it in. I want it. Okay. Also, do me a favor, will you please? Go to your local library. If this book's not on the bookshelf, go to your local library and say, hey, will you get People Matter at Work by Josh Block and put it in the library, because it's really good and it's going to benefit a lot of people. That's going to help him out, and that's going to help you and others as well. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, your business isn't broken. It's the person running it. I'm Coach Jay, executive performance coach to CEOs and founders of all sorts of companies. I was raised on a farm. I was trained in psychology. And here's what all that taught me. There are no business problems, only personal problems that are infecting your business. Fear, ego, a lack of resilience. Stop treating the symptoms, cure the disease. You can catch me every week here on A New Direction. Are you ready to do the work? You can email me at j@thecoachj.com. That's j@thecoachj.com. And Linda Craft Team Realtors. Nobody hands you a manual before buying your first home. What's an inspection contingency? Why does the offer matter more than the price? That's exactly why Triangle Families have called the Linda Craft Team since 1985. 40 plus years, 10,000 plus homes sold, and a team that treats you for your first house like it's the only one that matters. Stop guessing your way through it. Start at lindacraft.com. That's LINDACRAFT.com. Your first home done right. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Josh Block. Well, he doesn't know we're friends, but I've just said we are, and so he'll have to get over it at some point. The book is entitled People Matter at Work, Fostering a Culture Where Team Members Thrive and Everyone Wins. In chapter 3, called Revealing the Heart of Culture, you are starting to take us through this journey of getting us from the me cycle to the we cycle is where we're trying to go here. And you make a statement right away in this chapter, almost the very first thing. You say, flipping the me cycle requires some clarity and intention. And you start talking about the air we breathe and comparing culture and what we are, the air we breathe. So let's talk about flipping the me cycle. When you say require some clarity and intention, what are we trying to do here?
Yeah, I think we talked earlier, and you shared about your values. Is like, values are not to be chat GPT'd. Like, oh, these ones would sound good, or these look good on the wall. But really, they should be the things that when you cut us, when you cut my arm, they bleed out. And so for me, when it comes to culture, I would encourage anyone, whether it's Reading People Matter at Work or any other book, is be authentic, to be honest with what those values are you hold. And if your goal is 80 hours a week, the number one focus is flip a company or to grow by 40% every year, whatever that is to be honest about what is the culture that you want to create. It might be total performance and no care for people. It might be entirely care for people without regard for performance. Is when we're honest about it. The beautiful thing is it functions like a magnet, is that people are drawn to that culture and others are repelled. And that's that's what we want, right? We want the people to come to our organization who know what we stand for, whose values are aligned with ours, and then they stay, versus saying, oh, we care all about people and we're all about honor. And then when people get in there, it's a total bait and switch, and they know that it's not true at all. And so what I love about this idea of intention is, like, be totally honest with who you are. And if we watch Shark Tank, you can tell from each of the sharks what they value by what questions they ask and by what kind of businesses they partner with and how they get emotional when certain people talk about certain things. And so for us to, rather than like chase after good sounding values, to actually unearth and then like put a magnifying glass on and speak it out loud that this is who we're going to be at our best as an organization. And I think there's incredible value in that, even if your values are very different than mine.
Before we get into defining culture, which, by the way, you're going to say culture is one of those terms that means everything and means nothing at the same time. You give us 3 smoke signals of an unhealthy culture: blaming, shaming, and gaming. Let's just briefly talk about those smoke signals of blaming, shaming, and gaming so that people get clarity in their own business of what they should be looking for.
Yeah, the blame is consummate, and blame is the antithesis of teamwork. It breaks trust down, and I have a friend who teaches, and he just talks about, like, the person to take responsibility is always the most mature one. And in this case, it ideally is the leader. Is when something goes wrong, the leader asks themselves, what could I have done differently? Because I did something to cause this mistake. I could have hired the person. I trained the person. I hired the person who hired the person. I put the whatever it is in place. What could I have done to communicate differently? Even if, there's a lot of leaders, I can't believe how clueless that person is, that they made this mistake over and over and over. And I'd say, you hired them. Like, you hired them, you trained them. Oh, by the way, after they made the mistake twice, you kept them. So, like, at the end of the day, we as leaders in healthy organizations, we take responsibility versus blaming. Shaming is the kind of flows out of taking responsibility, is understanding that mistakes are part of the deal. And so the more we can acknowledge, if we're going to take risks, we're going to fail. And that's part of working together. That's part of growing a business. And so the more we're able to move from shame to really acknowledging and owning mistakes, our own mistakes, inviting it, making it a safe place for other people to own their mistakes. And what we find with blaming and when we don't shame is when I take responsibility, like there's a situation, I made a mistake, actually apologized to the person in front of the entire organization. And right after that conversation in an all-team meeting, she walked up to me and she's like, I knew that you were having a difficult day before our meeting and I should have rescheduled. And it was not her responsibility to reschedule whatsoever, but it was fascinating. Like, when I took responsibility for really, I think 95 or 99% of the deal, she took responsibility as well. Everyone's taking responsibility. Everyone's taking ownership. And then we move to the gaming piece, is that it becomes all about politics and hiding our mistakes and taking responsibility for all the wins. And so that's where gamesmanship starts to place. People hoard information as opposed to sharing it openly. And so blaming, shaming, and gaming are, again, a couple smoke signals to a toxic culture.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to dig into culture too much, because we've talked about it. We've kind of talked about it quite a bit, that it comes from the values, and we're going to have a culture whether we just, intentionally choose one or not, right? You're going to have a culture, but we should be intentional about it, and it should come from our core values. And if you don't know what your core values are and you don't know what those are, well, you've created a culture, right? And these smoke signals become really, really important to defining that. I think, though, the one thing that I want to start moving into, because this does affect culture, and it's the 3 T's. Mm-hmm. And I think these are just really fundamentally important, because I've never read anybody put these together in this way. The 3 T's and the 3 S's, right? So let's go through the 3 T's beginning. This is part 3 of the book, by the way. He's got in parts. By the way, at the end of each chapter, he has a section called Level Up, where he asks really poignant questions that you should ultimately consider and that you really need to think through, to take a look at yourself honestly and take a look at your business honestly, take a look at your culture honestly. They're really, really good. I found them incredibly enlightening and developing. So that said, let's start with the first of the 3 T's. Chapter 4 is better together. What? What do you mean better together?
Yeah, it's so when I became president, it was so fast. I hadn't seen a P&L, hadn't seen cash flow statement, had not been to our Japan office. There was so much I didn't know. And so it really, born out of this gift of humility was this: we've got to do it together. I mean, like for me to have tried to fake it, pull myself up by my bootstraps, there was just no chance. And so in working really intentionally to build a culture where trust was strong and we were all rowing in the same direction, I found this idea of doing it together as this sharpening any decision of consequence with someone else. And that might be inside the organization, it might be outside. And if we have kind of a spectrum, we have dictatorship on one end, which is where most leaders probably fall, is that it's my way or the highway. I'm here to make the calls. Then every now and again, you'll catch a leader on the other side, which is democracy, which is I bring, I put decisions out on the table. We kind of vote, or I make decisions that everyone will bring the most peace. And I would say that the ideal is right between dictatorship and democracy, that we're not advocating our leadership to the people. We're also not making all the decisions on our own. Really using other people's knowledge, information, context, background to sharpen decisions all the way up till the end and then launch them. Because when people weigh in, they buy in. And so that's really the significance of using other people to sharpen decisions of consequence and making decisions together.
Oh, but Josh, I'm speaking as a
Sure.
believer, right? Oh, but Josh, that's going to take a whole lot longer, especially with the thousands of decisions I have to make. And you say what?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the person who says that, they're oftentimes spending a lot of time cleaning up decisions that were made without other people's input. I'm the water cooler talk and they end up really pushing a rope rather than steering a rocket because people aren't bought in. And if you take just a little bit of extra time and you get buy-in before, you fuel up it and then you launch it. And so that's just the difference, is that I don't launch it and then kind of correct and redirect it. And so I think there's a ton of time trying to fix decisions or sell decisions after they're made, rather than actually working together, making them together, and then not having to make them again and again and again.
Excellent. I knew you were going to come through for me on that one. I just knew you would. I knew you would. The second T, right? So is the power of thoughtful decisions. But you do something a little different here. There's kind of this two-part definition of thoughtful that you bring into it that gives it a deeper meaning, right? Because you say the first half is the idea of showing careful consideration, right? But then, and you say, and I love how you phrase this, by the way. I love how you wrote this. Now for the mic drop part of the definition. Showing careful consideration for the needs of others.
Yeah.
Talk about the idea here of thoughtful decisions.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the 3 T's is that these were not there at the beginning. It was a lonely road. It was a dark path of trying to kind of wander and put one foot in front of another. And we were not thinking about writing a book in the early days. The goal was just keep the company afloat. We had just gone through some layoffs and there was this word within that was just thoughtful. I want to make thoughtful decisions. I was obviously a young leader. Lots of people were older than me. And so I don't know exactly where it came from, but I just say this word was strong within me. And I would encourage leaders who are listening to think about those words. When there's a word that kind of grips you and boy, I just can't shake that this word or this image or this from Ted Lasso or there's something that resonates with you, believe, right? And Ted Lasso's language is to pay attention to that. And so for me, it was thoughtful. So I was like, we got to make thoughtful decisions. We've got to make thoughtful decisions. We've got to make thoughtful decisions. And then all these years later came across the definition you shared. And it was like a light bulb went off, is use careful consideration. And that's not mic droppy at all. Everybody tries to use careful consideration. Nobody wants to make haphazard decisions. Use careful consideration for the needs of others. And what happens is when we're followers, when we're on the team, we watch leaders and we're like, I can't believe they did that. I can't believe they said that. That's the dumbest decision in the world. And then we step into the leadership seat and our leaders will get ready to make a decision. I'd say, what would your 25-year-old self say when you were account executive, before you were a vice president? You'd put gum in your hair. Like, you'd be so frustrated. And so, and I'll ask a leader every now and again, what would it feel like to be on the other side of this? Oh, I don't think I'd like it very much. Okay, then don't do it, right? Like, this idea, and none of us are perfect in it, but trying that when I think of work boot stipends, or obviously compensation and workspaces are super sensitive topics. But when we're getting ready to roll out a decision, if we think it's going to bring a ton of negativity, it like measure twice on that. And if we do, then let's at least go out front and say, hey, we know this isn't going to be a popular decision. We've considered all alternatives. And yet we've decided to go in this direction because of XYZ. We'd really appreciate your support, despite the fact that it's going to create some challenges. Is just be honest with what it's like to be on the other side of that decision, which of course dovetails us into the last T, which is transparency. Is just say it like it is.
Before we leave thoughtful decisions and careful consideration for the needs of others, I think it's important that we relate a story from you, because I found the story funny, because you say when decisions ignore people's needs or the impact each decision the impact they may have on the results can be devastating. And you say we learned this was, and I'm referring to Coke-gate 2015.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was such a great story, and I have it highlighted here because I think when we're not, this is how easy it happens, where we're thinking we're making the right decision, but we're not thinking about the impact that it may have on others. So just kind of relay the story, if you will, real quickly.
Yeah, so we have an engineering team in our organization, and they were on a separate profit and loss statement, and it really, I mean, leaders are sense makers. Our job is to make sense of things for people, and so this was a mistake. There was communication that this part of the team was losing the organization money, viewing them more as a profit center than really an investment or a cost center. And so a decision was made and passed down, and it's eerie. It's kind of embarrassing to say, but it was that in order to save money, the company wasn't going to pay for drinks anymore. And so whether it's soda, beer, or whatever it was, you've got a couple hundred people buying, I don't know, a couple thousand beers over the course of a year. And what that, not only was it ineffective, like, oh, we're a I don't know, $75 million organization at the time. So not only are you only going to save $2,422, but it sent a message that we don't care. And it had I think that care has a disproportionate effect on people, and carelessness is when people are looking to justify why their boss cares or doesn't care. They go back to these little silly stories. Can you believe they took away the vending machines? Can you believe it? And so that decision was reversed pretty quickly, and I'm not even sure all of how it came to be, but I will tell you that those stories end up having a real tail on them, and they become fodder for the fire of, they just don't care about us. And since they don't care about us, we shouldn't care about them. And instead, the real goal, recognizing the significance of who these engineers are in our organization, they're on site with the engineers, they're on site with customers, they're staying late oftentimes. They are the lifeblood of the organization in so many ways. And to say, we're not going to pay whatever the number is for you to have a beer or root beer or whatever it is at the end of the day is insulting and most certainly thoughtless.
I just found the story so funny, but it makes a great point, right? It makes a tremendous point that it is, and you talk about this throughout the book, it's little things, right? It's little things that add up along the way that affect our culture, that affect our people, that we don't even recognize. We think we're doing something bigger by saving money, and ultimately we're not really saving anything. What we're doing is we're creating resentment, dissension, and other things that could be happening underneath. But we're going to go to break here in a little bit, but before we get into transparency, because I do want to talk about it, you did say before diving into the third T, which is transparency, I want to highlight that culture building is capacity building. Real quickly, what do you mean that culture building is capacity building?
Yeah, same with when you said, I don't have time to make decisions together. I'd say I don't have time not to. Like, it is what has created capacity, not only through making good decisions, measuring twice, cutting once is capacity building, but also when I make decisions together and I make decisions thoughtfully, people take ownership. That my goal for People Matter at Work and for this book and movement is that this should lighten the load of leaders, because most leaders, they sign up for leadership or they get tapped on the shoulder, and because they were so good at doing a certain task, they think that success is, yeah, I just got to be now I just got to be a really great technician. And so the goal of all of it, when we lead with the three P's, when we invest, develop, and give away leadership, the load should actually lighten for us, and we should grow capacity in others, grow our own capacity, and grow the organization's capacity to expand.
His name's Josh Block. The book, People Matter at Work, Fostering a Culture Where Team Members Thrive and Everyone Wins, available everywhere books are sold, Amazon as well. I'll be writing a 5-star review today for the book because it's absolutely fantastic. I just love this book. This is a top shelf book for me. You're listening to him here on A New Direction. Hey, you know what? You can't cheat the harvest. That's what we say back home. And you can't out-hustle mindset that's holding you back. I'm Coach Jay, executive performance coach and host of this show, A New Direction. I work with CEOs, founders who built something they love and somehow ended up trapped inside it. Does that sound familiar? It's not the economy. It's not your team. It's the story you keep telling yourself. You plant the right seeds. You do the real work. You reap what you actually deserve, right? So listen, you want it to change? You want to start reaping what you should deserve? Why don't you get a hold of me at jay@thecoachjay.com. That's JY@thecoachjay.com. I'm happy to serve. Let's go. And then, listen, every home holds a story, right? The nursery you painted twice, the porch where the dog waited every day at 5. When it's time to write your next chapter, you want a team that knows the house is never just a listing. For 40 years, the Linda Craft team has helped Triangle Family sell for what their story is worth. Ready to write that? What's next? Ready to write your next chapter? Ready to write your next book? Visit lindacraft.com. It's LINDACRAFT.com, where your next chapter begins. And we're back here on A New Direction with my friend Josh Block, author of People Matter at Work. Took him 6 years to write this, by the way, and it was worth the wait for sure. Fostering a culture where team members thrive and everyone wins. Just a great book. I can't recommend it. I think it's a book, by the way, I think it's a book for you aspiring leaders, but I think it's for those folks in leadership who are struggling to go, I don't know what to do. I feel like I've tried everything I can try. I don't know what to do. My guess is you haven't tried this. Just saying, right? Josh, chapter 6, opening the window to transparency. And you summed it up pretty quickly, but there's 3 questions that drive transparency that you point out in this chapter. The first is people want to know what's going on. People want to know what are you thinking, and people want to know what are you thinking about me. Let's talk about those real quick.
Yeah, people, like, information's power. So whenever we don't give information, it's disempowering. And we all, I mean, who likes hearing 2 people whisper in a room 10 feet away from them, right? Because there's a feeling of being left out. And so transparency is this, like, ability to read people in, to actually provide clarity for people in these 3 areas. And one is what's going on. And you'd be surprised. People, like, their imaginations run wild. They're thinking all these things are going on. And we do them a great honor when we just tell them that, hey, we're putting in a new parking lot, or we're starting to shift in this direction, or we're really looking to accomplish this in a given business, or we're facing some challenges with this software, this customers. Tell them what's going on. The second is to share what the leader is thinking about. Is that whether you're listening to a podcast, whether you're concerned about some of the data around parts quality or around customer retention or whatever it is kind of what the leader is thinking about. And I coached someone this morning and just said, like, for you to walk into a meeting and say, these are my 3 priorities between now and the end of the year. Is I'm looking to build this bridge, I'm looking to nurture this customer, and I'm looking to make sure that this software ends up on the App Exchange, right? It's like telling people that, and even inviting them to challenge it is so powerful to building ownership. So they want to know what's going on, what the leader's thinking about, and then what's the leader thinking about me. This is really where the rubber meets the road. Is we think we're being kind by holding back. And the reality is good people, the people who want to keep, the people who want to grow, they want feedback. And so telling them, keeping a really short memory when it comes to feedback is when I think something, I want the people that I lead to know that when I think something that could strengthen their development, could make them better, or is holding them back, the only gap of time between me thinking it and me telling them is just getting the thoughts in a fashion that would be helpful for them. And so I tell a story, as you know, in the book about Amy, who's our VP of communications. And she, at the end of a one-on-one, just says, this is all the feedback I have for you. I'm holding nothing back. And so people don't have to think about the filing cabinets they don't have to guess. Oh, Jay probably thinks this, or he probably feels that. He's probably really concerned about this. And you're like, there are people who've walked up to me and thought that. I'm like, you did that 3 years ago. I haven't thought about it once. Never even went through my mind. But I am concerned about these 2 things over here. And so instead of making them guess, why not just tell them what you're really thinking and what you're really thinking about them?
But at the same time, you put guardrails on transparency when we're giving feedback, right? So why don't you give us a few of those guardrails that we have to have in transparency? Because we certainly don't want to blow people out of the water. Because sometimes we could come in there with battleships, right? We got people coming there and just I'm just going to tell you everything that's wrong with you, right? And sometimes, it's about me. I'm in the me cycle, right?
Sure.
Right. So it's about me, or I've got some personal frustration, right? Talk about what what some of the guardrails are for transparency.
Yeah, I think it's visionary. And it's kind. It's through their lens. So similar to the platinum rule is I'm sharing it of like, this is my hope for you. And in time it becomes, this is what's really necessary for you to be here, is to perform in these ways. But that it's all about them. Is how would you like feedback to be given? Would you like someone to walk into your office and just give you a whole bunch of complaints? Rather saying, hey Jay, I saw it when you talked to the customer. I noticed that there were a number of times where you talked over top of them, or you kind of rushed them, or maybe you didn't answer a question directly. These are all things that grown, mature people who you really want on the team can metabolize. And so it's through the lens of their growth and development, not me feeling like I'm a really powerful know-it-all.
I think it's just so important, when we give feedback. I think it just has to be, I think we got to look at the potential of the person we're in front of.
Sure.
And are we really, when we're giving the feedback, am I helping them get to their potential, or am I knocking them down? I don't want to ever do that to a person. I want to go, okay, I know what they're capable of. I want to help them get there. So I want my feedback to be honest, but constructively honest, in a way that says, I see more in you. I know you're capable of more. I can see already what you're capable of. Here's where I could see us maybe working together, and tell me how and then I like to do the AAR approach, right? What's gone right? What's gone wrong? And what could we do better? And I mean the we, meaning I'm part of the solution, right? Not what you can do better. What can we do better? That's right? Together, right? And I think that becomes critical to giving really good feedback, right? Because I want them to take, listen, even when the feedback is going to be a little rough, there's still some wins, right? And I think we have to still acknowledge some of the wins, right? Even if most of it is a lot went wrong.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's the Brene Brown thing, right?
Clear is kind, yeah.
Clear is kind, right? But also I'm interested in growth, right? I don't want you to leave the meeting feel like, I'm so beat up, I don't want to ever do this again.
Sure.
That's not what I want, right? We didn't want that for our kids either, right? Mm-hmm. You want your kid to tell the truth. Well, yeah, you got to figure out, how am I going to make these consequences, right? I would rather have you tell the truth and reduce the consequences, but I want you to constantly tell me the truth.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure, and I think that it's a way of setting a standard. And there may be a time where you say, hey, the expectation is that you make 75 cold calls a day, and they may look at you and say, I can't do that. And I'd say, great. Like, there's the only time that's better than today to find that out is 90 days ago. Like, is to start with a standard. And we've talked about that in a couple of situations recently. Is one of the most difficult things is to give someone feedback when there hasn't been a standard.
Right.
And so when there hasn't, for a new leader to come in and say, these are my expectations for a leader of a service department, or these are my expectations for someone who leads a parts sales department, it's only then can you hold them accountable. I'm not saying the standard is going to be absolutely perfectly clear.
Right.
When it's super hard to understand, it's extremely difficult to hold someone accountable to it.
I don't want to get into these specifically, but I would like you to give us an overview of the 3 S's of safe, seen, and successful. Just give us a highlight overview of the importance of safe, seen, and successful, and who that is talking to. And if you don't mind, can you give us more of a high-level view rather than a very specific view of that?
Sure. So when you lead with the 3 T's, it's I won't say it's simple, but I'll say that it's very natural that when you make decisions together, when you make decisions that are carefully considering the needs of others, and then you're clear about them, it tends to create a culture where people are safe, they feel secure, they feel seen and known and cared for, and they also feel successful because you've set them up for success through giving feedback.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot, listen, as a psychological professional, there's a lot being talked about psychological safety, right? There's a ton of work being done on that. But I thought the thing about being seen is just so critical here. I don't know that people, especially as companies get bigger, right? And things turn into bigger levels, it's easy for people not to be seen. But even in small companies, right? We can focus so much on the salespeople that we forget about the administrative people who are putting in the hard work on the side, and we're not seeing them. I think that's so critical to the success ultimately. Yeah, it's got to be safe, but they got to be seen too. That was kind of my thought process on that.
So big. It's so big. Is that the opposite of that would be I'm a number. Does Jay even know my name? Like, and we've seen it in movies before as someone walks by someone and knocks the other person's stuff out of their hand, and so seeing them as a person, seeing them as a whole person with their story and everything that's going on in their life inside and outside of work is just so big.
Josh, you've been great, man. We've done an hour. I've enjoyed every second I've had with you. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully you have too. Tell people how they can get a hold of you. I know you offer great coaching and other services. Tell them what you offer and tell them where they can reach you.
Yeah, they're welcome to check out peoplematteratwork.com, or they can reach out to me at josh@peoplematteratwork.com. Mainly keynotes. That's whether it be virtual or in person is what I'm focused on the most in this season, but happy to work alongside you in supporting people in any way that we can.
Awesome. Josh, stay with me. Thank you so much. Truly grateful. Folks, it's the show. You know what I say to you every week, you can control 3 things: your attitude, your effort, and your resiliency. Life doesn't always give us what we want, and sometimes we find ourselves in circumstances we did not choose. But you know what you are in control of? Your attitude, right? It's not always easy, but it is the one thing within our control, right? So start your day deciding what your attitude is going to be and make it a positive one. Your effort is tied to your excellence, right? We don't always have the same amount of energy every day of how much effort we can give, but we can be excellent with whatever effort we have. Choose to be excellent with your effort. And finally, resiliency. We all get punched in the gut or punched in the teeth, right? We get knocked down, but it's up to us to get back up. Why? Because you're worth it, you have value, and we want you on the team. You had a lot of choices. You chose us. I appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, wherever you're listening to the show, and it's a lot of places. Would you give us a 5-star review? And most of all, tell your friends. We really do appreciate it to tune in. As I say to you all over the world, I'm so appreciative of all of you, and ciao, everybody.